Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Asi, and if you are new here, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for coming back. This is probably the second video I'm making with this on, but I did want to have a conversation about womanhood because I saw a video on TikTok literally this morning as I woke up, and I've had a lot of thoughts around the concept of girlhood, the concept of womanhood, and my experiences being a girl and a woman, and the adjustment to what it means to be a woman in my 20s, a black woman at that, with all of the sociocultural thinking that I tend to do, and my experiences of how I've been socialized, etc. And yeah, I just thought it would be a great video to sit down and make. This is not going to be coming from a point of like generalizations, I guess. I not necessarily generalizations, but there may be a generalizations, but it's more so coming from lived experiences that I've had, and just some thoughts that I've picked up from the internet from other people that I perhaps want to extend on. So yeah, I don't have anything noted though, it's just all in my head, so whatever comes out comes out. I think for majority of my life I've rejected womanhood, and I recently was having a conversation, or girlhood rather. I was recently having a conversation with a friend of mine. She had come down from Joburg to Cape Town, and we were talking about the rejection that we've had or faced towards girlhood. And I've always had an issue with being told what to do, just in general. And a big part of why I rejected femininity and what it means to be a girl was as a result of that. Interestingly, my background, I think I speak about this all the time on the internet, but I grew up in a family that predominantly has men. There are a lot of us at home, but within that, my mom, myself, and my granny are the only women that have, well, my mom and my granny have been the only women that are in my life. My mom mainly has brothers, and I have younger brothers as well. So it's a very testosterone driven household, very patriarchal, with my grandfather having been the head of household. And I think I saw the shift after he passed in terms of like looking at the dynamic switch in leadership at home. It's been such a fascinating thing to look at and critique and analyze in different ways. But with all of that being said, I think growing up I understood that womanhood didn't necessarily have much value outside of the patriarchal, things that women are deemed valued for. So women cook, clean, get married. Women, do all of these things that like are expected of what women should be doing. And I knew from a very young age that I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't want to align my life with like looking for a husband. I didn't want to identify with my womanhood. I didn't want to identify my girlhood with that, with trying to, appeal to a certain standard. I also think back to when I was in high school, when I had this radical kind of just rejection towards femininity. I would constantly be preached to about, men are not going to find you attractive because you're doing A, B, C, and D. And I've always been really into sports. Like I played hockey in high school. I did fitness. I coached some stuff here and there. And I'd constantly be told about, oh, men are not going to like you because A, B, C, and D. That's literally in grade 9. I cut my hair. I was like, I'm done with this. You're not going to tell me what to do. You don't tell me what to do. And even with that radical sense of just rejection, I don't think at the time I knew, what I was doing in that sense. I just did not want to be told what to do, or did not want to be told how to live my life. Like I'd be playing with my cousins outside and I'd be told girls shouldn't be doing A, B, C, and D. Interestingly, at home, my family didn't have a problem with the things that I did. So I would find it interesting that like neighbors would feel the need to let me know that they feel like the way that I'm living my life is not up to standard. It's not what a woman should be doing. And I remember in high school, I think around like grade 11, I started noticing that when it comes to womanhood and understanding girlhood, there isn't really a time in which girls become women, but men, the moment they turn, or boys, the moment they turn 18, those boys become men automatically. There isn't really a conversation around it. But interestingly, because I'm from the Xhosa culture, boys go into initiation school when they turn 18, around those ages, and they become men, right? They go through that rite of passage, and they become men, and they recognize in society as men. There isn't really that sense of or rather, there are things that are done in some villages and some parts of the Eastern Cape that recognize, young girls becoming women. But in most parts, there isn't really that sense of, you're now becoming a man, or you're now becoming a woman. And so you kind of just figure yourself out. You go from being a girl and then you decide how you become a woman. A lot of the time your womanhood is attached to your relation to a man, and the validation of your womanhood comes from your relationship to a man. And you being related to a man in any capacity, especially in a romantic capacity, is what gives you value in society, is what deems you a woman. When you are married, you become a woman. When you have a child, you become a woman. It doesn't matter if you have all of these accolades, you've studied, you've become something. There's always something that's always been questionable about women that, have all of these accomplishments in terms of their career. There's the assumption that they're unhappy because they don't have a man. So a man's always the constant validator of what it means to be a woman and what it means to exist in society as a respectable woman. And I don't want to go too deeply into respectability politics, but when I noticed that, I found it really, really difficult to relate to men in any capacity, and kind of shut that out completely, because I was like, how do I exist as an entity or as a woman or as a young girl going into womanhood without identifying myself or needing men as a tool of validation to understand what it means to be a woman? Because I believe womanhood exists outside of manhood. You can be a woman without relating to a man in any capacity. And I think that's also what it means to decenter men. It means understanding yourself outside of that context. Who are you in relation to yourself, in relation to other women? And I very thankfully went to an all-girls school, which really, I think, cemented, the necessity to become a woman, or the necessity to understand my womanhood in relation to other women that were around me. And I value women's relationships and friendships with women as a result of that, because in my adolescent years, I was exposed to nurturing that kind of space. And I think I'll always be grateful for going to that school, because even in moments where, like, I'm in a different city, I'm in, an entirely different space, and I bump into somebody that I went to high school with, we're able to recognize each other and see the women that we are. Even if we didn't speak in high school, maybe like we used to see each other's faces on the corridors, or I'd see somebody on stage collecting an award or whatever, and I bump into them somewhere in Cape Town. I'm like, oh my gosh, hey, I remember your face. A hi, a recognition of that sisterhood, of that bond that we didn't necessarily create, but it's there because we existed in the same spaces. And I find value in my friendships with women, because I think it's such a foundational part of understanding myself. Like, I relate to other women, and I look at how other women navigate space, and I'm constantly inspired, especially, again, coming from a background that I came from, of not having sisters, of mainly having men around me. I don't want to disregard the positive aspects that came with, but I also want to emphasize that there's so much growth that came with me going to an all-girls school, and I think that's one of the best decisions that my family ever took for me, to put me in a space in which I can grow and become a woman. With that being said, I do think it's interesting, though, even having gone to an all-girls school, I've really struggled with relating or becoming a woman, right? I think I've always identified myself as a girl. Even with that being said, what I find really interesting is the constant reimagining that I have to do around my womanhood and what it means for me. Is femininity something that I expect of myself in my womanhood? Is masculinity something that can be present in my existence and in my navigation of womanhood? And I've often been told that I can't be myself. Like, I can't exhibit all of these character traits that are, synonymous with manhood. Like, I can't, there are aspects of myself that I've learned, obviously because of my socialization, that are closely linked to what manhood is deemed as. And I think because I grew up in a predominantly male family, and I was closer to my male family members, I find myself being very logic-based in terms of how I think about things. And, often it's expected that women are more emotional when they receive things, and there are all of these things that are expected of me. And I'm like, but I'm not that, and I'm okay with that. And I can be feminine without having those qualities that you expect from a woman, right? And femininity is not just in how you present yourself. And I think it's usually spoken about in terms of aesthetic. I think because you are a woman, you are innately feminine, inherently feminine. No one can take that away from you. That's who you are. You're a woman. You are both feminine and masculine. You don't need to have an aesthetic for that, is what I've come to learn in my 20s. And I think it's so powerful being in a position of constantly learning who I am as a woman right now, because there was a point in time where I really struggled relating to myself as a woman, and I completely had like an identity rejection, and I was just like, I'm done with this. I'm done listening to people about what womanhood is. I'm going to find out myself what it is. I'm going to explore it myself. And I look back at, 15-year-old me, and I'm like, damn, like, you really are brave. Like, you're really, you really are a brave one, and you've completely shut the world out and decided to do what you do. And I look at her with so much pride and so much admiration, because I don't think I would have gotten to the point that I'm at now of understanding being a woman in the way that I do. However, going back to me kind of navigating womanhood and aligning myself with what a woman is, I think even in conversations like where people are like, oh, we are, like, I'm just a girl, and I think that's an important conversation because it unites us as as women, and we feel it's whimsy, it's cute. Maybe it's not that deep to a lot of people, but I sometimes find it a little bit discomforting infantilizing myself, because I am a woman, right? And girlhood is something that is important. But I feel like a lot of the time, actually, the video that I was watching today was talking about how a lot of the time when you refer to men as boys, it becomes offensive. It sounds demeaning to them. They don't take lightly to it. But for women, that infantilization is expected, because the more infantilized you are, the more likely you are to be acceptable to society. And the things that make you somebody that's not an infant in that capacity is your relation to men. Again, it's a very patriarchal understanding and navigation of the world. And so sometimes there's a sense of discomfort that I face with, some terms of like, oh, we're all just girls, which it's cute, it's whimsy. Like, I say it as well. I'm not saying it's wrong to say it. I'm just saying when I deep it and I think about my relationship to girlhood and womanhood, I find it to be something that I try and stray away from, or I try and not, overly, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know what the word for that is in English, but it's been particularly interesting navigating space in that way and just figuring myself out, like, who am I right now? And I think I've faced so much trauma in my adolescent years around, trying to figure out and navigate girlhood. I faced so much shame from older women, and there are different aspects and respects in which a lot of young girls tend to, be sexualized or demoralized because their idea of femininity or womanhood does not look like, what society deems acceptable. And a lot of the time we are encouraged and socialized to think about how the world will receive us, instead of thinking about how we want to receive the world and how we want to navigate the world. And we're not brought up in environments that foster our growth. It's kind of just like, hey, you have to mold into something, you have to adapt to what society is. But unfortunately, and I think I've realized that from a very young age, well, actually, unfortunately, like, I want to be who I am when I want to be who I am, right? And I want to navigate womanhood in the way that I want to. I want to be colorful in my womanhood. I want to experience it in the way that I do. I want to learn from other women. I want to understand womanhood from the perspective and the lens of other women, because I've constantly been told what a woman is and what womanhood should look like, but it's often from the lens of women that look at the world in the lens of a man. And I think when I recognized that when I was younger, I realized, well, I actually would rather not hear what womanhood looks like and figure it out. And I am figuring it out, and I'm finding it so beautiful. It's such a healing journey. I think even in my navigation of space with other women, I'm learning constantly what it means to be a woman that has an outlook on life through the lens of other women. That, some of my friends that come from very matriarchal households, and I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. I value that so deeply, and I encourage myself on a constant basis to continuously kind of put myself in positions in which I'm challenged by other women. I'm challenged by other women in terms of how I see womanhood, what womanhood is. Unfortunately, because of the way that I was raised, I'm not absolved from viewing the world from a patriarchal lens. And sometimes I catch myself in moments and I'm like, where did you learn that? Why do you think of it in this way? And I find myself and I'm like, okay, I have to catch myself and constantly be aware of how I think and why I have certain ideas around, what it looks like to be a woman, etc. And I'm open to learning. I'm open to changing my mind constantly, because that's what it means to evolve as a woman, and to align with what womanhood is. And I think this entire journey has taught me that there isn't just one mold as to what a woman can look like, or what a woman should be thinking like, or what a woman should be feeling. Women are so dynamic, and man, I just think it's so beautiful getting to exist as a woman. And now the fact that I'm at the age that I'm at, and I'm finding so much pride in doing all of these things that I do in in the name of being in tune with what it means to me to have the identity of a woman and figuring out what that looks like for myself in my 20s. And I know it's probably going to change throughout time. I'm so happy to be experiencing that, and I'm excited at the potential of, you know, the kind of woman that I'll become in the future. But yeah,